There are moments in television history when silence in the room says more than 1,000 voices ever could. The night a celebrated TV host thought he could humiliate a black entrepreneur on live broadcast became one of those moments. Millions tuned in expecting another flashy interview, another round of quick questions and witty banter. But what they got was something else entirely. The host's smug smile would slowly fade, the laughter of the audience would turn into uneasy murmurs, and one man's measured, unshakable response would ripple across the country. This wasn't just a conversation, it was a confrontation with history, a collision of arrogance and truth, and a moment that forced America to ask itself some very uncomfortable questions. Viewers did not yet know it, but they were about to witness a takedown so precise and so dignified that even the host himself would struggle to recover from its impact. The story begins years before the cameras rolled. Marcus Ellison grew up in a modest neighborhood on the south side of Atlanta. His mother worked double shifts as a nurse, his father a mechanic who fixed cars until his hands ached each night. They were hardworking, loving parents who told Marcus that the world would try to place him in a box, but it was his responsibility to step out of it. From a young age, Marcus showed an unusual brilliance. While other children played ball in the streets, he would sit on the front porch with a second-hand laptop someone from church had donated. He wasn't just browsing games or videos. He was pulling apart code, studying business websites, and teaching himself how systems worked. By high school, he had created small apps that helped local shops track inventory, earning him the nickname, the tech kid, in the neighborhood, but brilliance didn't shield him from the daily cuts of prejudice. Teachers doubted his potential, counselors suggested safer career paths, and peers mocked his dreams of building a company that could one day compete with the giants of Silicon Valley. Yet Marcus never lowered his gaze. He believed that resilience was built in the furnace of doubt. By the time he entered college, he was already running a small startup. He would walk into rooms where he was often the only black entrepreneur and quickly realize that people weren't listening to his ideas, they were scanning his skin. Investors dismissed him before he even finished his pitch. Some called his vision unrealistic. Others asked if he had thought about joining forces with someone more experienced, a coded way of suggesting he should step aside, but Marcus persisted. Slowly, through persistence and networking, his company, Ellison Dynamics, took shape. It specialized in developing AI-driven solutions for agriculture, helping farmers optimize water use and crop yields. It wasn't glamorous, but it was revolutionary. Within 10 years, his company was serving clients across multiple continents. He employed hundreds, built a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth, and became a quiet yet undeniable force in the business world. And still, despite his achievements, he noticed something: mainstream media rarely invited him. Panels on technology would showcase entrepreneurs with far less experience, but not him. Major news outlets would cover flashy startups run by young white graduates, but not the man whose software was literally transforming food security. For Marcus, it was a reminder of how visibility and recognition were often distributed along lines of race and privilege. So when the invitation came to appear on one of America's most popular talk shows, he was cautious. The host, Richard Wallace, was known for his sharp tongue and habit of turning serious interviews into entertainment spectacles. He wasn't just a host, he was an instigator, a man who loved to put guests on the spot and expose any weakness they carried. For some, it was thrilling television. For others, it bordered on cruelty. Friends warned Marcus that Wallace was notorious for mocking successful black figures, using subtle digs wrapped in humor to diminish their achievements. Still, Marcus accepted. He wasn't seeking fame, but he knew millions watched Wallace's show. If he could sit there with dignity, speak his truth, and hold his ground, it might spark something greater than himself. The night of the interview, the studio lights burned bright. The audience buzzed with anticipation. Wallace strutted onto the stage, flashing that trademark grin, already rehearsing his barbed jokes. He believed Marcus would be easy prey, a serious businessman walking into the lion's den. But what he didn't realize was that Marcus had walked through tougher fires than this stage could ever ignite. The interview began with polite questions. Wallace asked about Marcus's background, his company, his vision for the future. But even in these early moments, the tone was laced with condescension. "So, you're basically a farmer's tech support guy?" Wallace quipped, drawing chuckles from the audience. Marcus smiled faintly, unfazed, and explained in calm detail how his innovations were reducing hunger and saving water worldwide. As the minutes passed, Wallace grew bolder. He interrupted Marcus repeatedly, twisted his words, and exaggerated stereotypes. He mocked Marcus's southern roots, asking if he'd learned coding between picking cotton fields. The audience laughed nervously, unsure whether to side with the humor or the unease settling in the air, but Marcus remained steady. He didn't flinch or raise his voice. Instead, he let Wallace's words hang heavy, exposing the ugliness behind the humor. With every smug remark, Marcus responded with composure, weaving facts and lived experience into his answers. He spoke of how systemic barriers weren't abstract concepts, they were daily realities. He reminded viewers that while innovation could spring from anywhere, opportunity was rarely distributed equally. Wallace, sensing he was losing ground, leaned into provocation. He accused Marcus of playing the race card, claiming that success in America was simply about hard work and not systemic bias. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some clapped, others sat silent. It was a familiar script, one that sought to dismiss centuries of history with a single shrug. Marcus knew this was the moment he had prepared for. He didn't need to outshout Wallace. He needed to outshine him with truth. He began recounting stories of pitching investors who wouldn't shake his hand, of media outlets ignoring his breakthroughs, of employees facing harassment while representing his company. He connected these experiences not to personal grievance but to the broader narrative of racial inequality in corporate America. As Marcus spoke, the energy in the room shifted. The laughter subsided. The smirk on Wallace's face tightened. The audience leaned in, realizing they were no longer watching a late-night comedy segment. They were witnessing a reckoning. Then came the defining moment. Wallace smirked and asked, "So, are you saying America is racist?" "Because I think people watching at home are tired of hearing complaints. If you made it, anyone can. Isn't that proof enough?" The question was meant as a trap. But Marcus leaned forward, calm and deliberate. He didn't raise his voice, didn't show anger. Instead, he unfolded the receipts of history. He spoke of black inventors erased from textbooks, of entrepreneurs denied loans despite perfect credit, of neighborhoods stripped of investment through redlining. He reminded the audience that success stories like his were not proof of a level playing field but evidence of extraordinary resilience in the face of stacked odds. And then, with surgical precision, he turned Wallace's own words against him. "If you believe my success means racism doesn't exist," Marcus said, "then by that logic, one man surviving a storm means the storm was never real." The studio fell silent. Wallace opened his mouth, but no words came out. The audience erupted, not in laughter but in thunderous applause. It was the rare moment when truth broke through spectacle, when dignity silenced mockery. The days after the broadcast were unlike anything Marcus had experienced. Clips of the interview spread across social media, gaining millions of views. Headlines read, "Entrepreneur exposes TV host in brutal takedown," and "Marcus Ellison redefines what it means to win on live television." Wallace, once untouchable, faced widespread criticism. Viewers accused him of perpetuating racist stereotypes and trying to belittle a man who had built something extraordinary. Sponsors pulled ads, networks issued statements, and suddenly the man who had thrived on humiliating others was forced into a defensive silence. But Marcus didn't gloat. He declined interview requests that wanted him to bash the host further. Instead, he used the spotlight to talk about the future, about creating pathways for young entrepreneurs of color, about dismantling barriers that kept voices invisible, about building an America that didn't just clap for resilience but invested in equity. For many watching, Marcus's composure was more than a personal victory. It was a masterclass in responding to prejudice with power rooted not in aggression but in truth. Communities held discussions, classrooms analyzed the interview, and countless young viewers said they felt seen for the first time on national television. In the end, Marcus walked away unchanged in his essence. He was still the man who believed in working quietly, building steadily, and letting results speak louder than spectacle. But America had changed. It had been forced, if only for a moment, to confront the uncomfortable gap between its ideals and its reality, and perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. As the final applause of that night echoed across television screens, Marcus left viewers with a silent question that lingered long after the credits rolled. What kind of country do we want to be? The one that laughs at prejudice or the one that listens to truth?